The last conversation I had with my grandmother Maggie was over tea in her sunroom. She was in her favorite recliner, a crocheted blanket over her knees, staring out the window like the backyard trees were whispering secrets. I asked if she needed help with her mail. She just smiled and said, "No, David. Some letters only open when the time is right." I didn't know what the hell that meant. 2 weeks later, she was gone. Heart failure in her sleep. Peaceful, the doctor said. I was numb, more than anything. She'd been the only person in our family who ever really saw me. Everyone else, my parents, my golden boy younger brother Tyler, acted like I was wallpaper. Reliable. Plain. Always there to clean up, never there to shine. At the funeral, my dad made it clear I wasn't to speak. Tyler will handle the eulogy, he said, like it was obvious. Tyler, who once got arrested for crashing Mom's Lexus into a golf cart during a bender in Scottsdale. Tyler, whom Maggie bailed out quietly more than once while I kept my mouth shut. It wasn't rage I felt, exactly. Just a kind of ache. Like watching a movie where you don't exist. You're not even an extra. Just there. But I went. Sat through Tyler's grandstanding speech about how Maggie made the best brownies and taught us all how to love unconditionally. My parents nodded like it was gospel. I stared at my hands, knowing damn well Tyler hadn't visited her once in the last 6 months. Then came the will reading. We gathered in Maggie's old lawyer's office. Wood-paneled walls. Smelled like dust and lemon oil. Her estate wasn't massive by billionaire standards, but she had assets, property, stocks, and the family trust. We all knew Tyler would get the lion's share. He always did. The surprise was how much my parents were getting too. My dad looked smug as hell when the lawyer read, "To my son Gerald and daughter-in-law Marlene, I leave the Brentwood home, its contents, and a monthly stipend from the trust." I waited. Not expectantly, just politely. Then came. "To my grandson, David Mitchell, I leave the sum of $1. Laughter. Real laughter. My mother actually covered her mouth to stifle a giggle. Tyler snorted and whispered, "Guess you should have visited more, Davy." I didn't react. I felt heat rise to my ears, but I kept my face still. $1. Not even enough to buy a decent cup of coffee. The lawyer paused for a moment, like letting the insult hang there. And, he continued, a box of handwritten recipe cards, which he requested be delivered directly to him. That's when the room went quiet. Not because recipe cards were worth anything, but because the slap felt too deliberate, too personal. Tyler's smirk faded a little. I stood up, took the small cardboard box from the lawyer's assistant. Said nothing. As I turned to leave, the lawyer cleared his throat again. "There is one more item," he said, looking directly at me. "Per Mrs. Mitchell's instructions, a safety deposit box located in Zurich is accessible only by David Mitchell. Details have been sent privately to your email." Every head swiveled toward me. "What the hell does that mean?" My dad barked. The lawyer didn't flinch. "It means exactly what it says, Gerald." Tyler scoffed. "Zurich? Like Switzerland?" I nodded slowly, heart pounding. "Yeah, like Switzerland." Then I walked out, holding a dead woman's recipe box and a room full of questions. I didn't open the box for 2 days. It sat on my kitchen counter, untouched. Just an old cardboard shoebox, wrapped in twine and sealed with brittle tape. I wasn't ready. Part of me wondered if this was Maggie's final joke. Some kind of cryptic message wrapped in humiliation. $1 and a box of dusty recipes? Maybe she'd lost it in the end. But then I got the email. It came from a Zurich law firm, real, verified. It included the address of a Swiss bank, the name of a contact, and a unique 6-digit access code. No explanations. Just instructions. And Maggie's signature at the bottom, scanned in delicate, trembling ink. That's when I realized this wasn't an oversight. She'd planned this. The insult at the will reading wasn't a mistake. It was bait. I opened the box. Inside were about 100 recipe cards, all in Maggie's precise, looping handwriting. Sunday pot roast. Lemon pudding cake. Cheddar drop biscuits. But each one had more than ingredients. There were notes scribbled on the backs. At first, they seemed random. Never lend money to someone who makes excuses. You'll lose the money and the respect. The first person to raise their voice in an argument is usually wrong. The second is just reacting. Pride wears a silk mask over a paper face. Rain always shows the truth. It was like a cookbook and a diary had a secret child. I read for hours. Every few cards, the notes got more personal. Tyler needed love, but I fear he needed limits more. David has his grandfather's eyes. And his spine. That one stopped me cold. I barely remembered my grandfather. He died when I was 6. But Maggie had spoken of him like he was a lighthouse in a storm. Quiet, steady, unshakable. I flipped more cards. Some had dates, like journal entries. One was marked July 12, 2009, my high school graduation. David stood alone near the punch bowl. I saw him watching his parents celebrate Tyler's soccer scholarship. No one said a word about David's academic award. He noticed. He just didn't say anything. He's good at swallowing things he shouldn't have to. I had no idea she saw that. No one had even looked my way that day. I started crying. Not the loud kind. Just slow, leaking tears that I didn't wipe away. I sat there, recipe cards spread out like tarot, each one telling a story I hadn't realized someone was paying attention to. 3 days later, I flew to Zurich. The bank was a monolith of glass and stone, tucked in a quiet street near the lake. The clerk led me into a private room. When I entered the access code, a panel slid open revealing a single black folder. Inside, documents, notarized papers, and a printed letter. David. If you're reading this, then the room full of vultures laughed at you. Let them. You've been underestimated your whole life because you're calm, because you listen, because you think before you speak. That's not weakness. That's power. I've left you the real inheritance. The account listed here contains $8.2 million spread across diversified assets. But more importantly, you now have full controlling interest in the Mitchell Family Trust. Yes, the same trust that owns the Brentwood house, your father's construction firm, and the lake cottage I gave to Tyler. They don't own those things. You do. As of this moment, don't use this to punish them. Use it to correct the record. You're not invisible, David. You never were. Love. Maggie. I read it twice. Then again. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me, but not in a bad way. I wasn't falling. I was rising. Maggie hadn't humiliated me. She'd crowned me in silence. And no one saw it coming. Flying home felt like slipping back into a version of myself that no longer fit. I was still David Mitchell, the quiet one, the reliable one, but something had shifted. I had proof now. Not just money, but a record of truth. Maggie's truth. My truth. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Instead, I spent the next week quietly transferring the trust's assets into secure oversight. The Swiss firm had a team ready. The Brentwood home title was confirmed under the family trust. My father's construction business? Also held by the trust. Tyler's lake cottage? Same story. They thought they were owners. Turns out, they were tenants on Maggie's terms, and now mine. I sat on this knowledge like a coiled spring. I needed time, not for revenge, but for precision. I went back to the recipe box and started sorting cards by theme, meals, and messages. It felt like decoding a legacy, somewhere painfully direct. Inheritance without responsibility is a curse. Watch how people treat the waiter. That's who they really are. Others were more personal. Gerald believes money proves love. That's why he never felt mine. Tyler will break unless someone hands him a mirror, not a hammer. I wrote everything down. Maggie wasn't just giving me wealth, she was giving me the playbook. For our family. For myself. Then I scheduled the meeting. I invited everyone, Mom, Dad, Tyler, to the Brentwood house under the guise of finalizing some loose ends with the will. I made sure they knew the lawyer would be present. That got their attention. When they arrived, I was already seated in Maggie's old armchair. The same one from the sunroom. I'd had it delivered the day before. It wasn't for comfort, it was for message. They walked in with practiced irritation. My father's jaw tight. My mother avoiding eye contact. Tyler with sunglasses on his head like he'd just come from a photo shoot that didn't happen. You're really doing all this for a recipe box, my mom said, setting her purse down. No, I said. For the truth. The lawyer, Mr. Keene, cleared his throat. I believe David asked us here to clarify some elements of Mrs. Mitchell's estate. Like why she humiliated him? Tyler smirked. I looked at him. Actually, no. Like why she gave me everything. Silence. I pulled the black folder from my briefcase and laid it on the coffee table. I slid the notarized trust documents across to my dad. You don't own this house. The trust does. And as of 2 weeks ago, I am the sole trustee. My mom let out a short, stunned breath. My dad didn't touch the folder. He just stared at it like it was radioactive. I've reviewed all the paperwork, I continued. Your business, Dad, runs through the same trust. And Tyler, your cottage? Same. Tyler laughed. No. That's bulls. Maggie signed that over to me. I have the deed. You have a revocable license of residence, I said. The property title is in the trust. I have the legal authority to revoke it. I let that sit. No shouting. No gloating. Just quiet, deliberate facts. You little bastard, my father said, low and bitter. No, I said, calmly. I'm the son Maggie actually trusted. My mother's voice broke. She always said you were manipulative. She also said you married someone who couldn't love what he didn't own. Her face crumpled. My voice stayed steady. I'm not evicting anyone. I'm not taking your business. I'm setting boundaries. I passed each of them an envelope. Inside were new terms: transparency, reporting, ethical use of assets. Tyler's included a clause: he could keep the cottage, rent-free, if he enrolled in a vocational or service program within 6 months. What is this, some kind of morality test? He scoffed. No, I said. It's an accountability test. Something none of us ever had until now. Mr. Keene folded his hands. Mrs. Mitchell anticipated this reaction. She trusted David to decide what to do with the family's future. And he has. They sat there, stunned. For once, I wasn't wallpaper. I was the foundation. They left the house one by one, each carrying their envelope like it was a threat or a bomb. My father was the first to go, face rigid and red. He didn't look at me. My mother lingered, her fingers trembling as she gripped the new terms. She always favored you, she whispered, not quite a question, not quite an accusation. No, I replied, gentle but firm. She just believed in consequences. Tyler was last. He stood in the foyer, looking at the envelope, then up at me. For a second, his mask slipped, and I saw something raw, maybe fear, maybe shame. You're really going to make me work for it? He asked, like he expected me to say it was all a bluff. Yes, I said. But you're smart, Ty. Smarter than you let on. He didn't argue. He just left, closing the door softly behind him. For the first time in my life, I was truly alone, and it didn't feel bad. It felt clean, like the air after a storm. I sat back down in Maggie's armchair and looked at the recipe cards again. Some had little stains on them, faint smudges of chocolate or grease. Evidence of use. Of life. I spent that night reading her notes, one by one. Each card felt like a lifeline. Some were advice I'd needed 20 years ago. If you want something to last, don't build it on a lie. Others felt like warnings for right now. A man who wins the game but loses himself is still a loser. There was one card tucked behind a bread recipe. The handwriting was shaky, as if she'd written it late at night. Forgiveness is harder when you're right. That's why it matters more. That line stuck with me. I was right, technically. The law, the money, the moral high ground, all on my side. But Maggie wasn't asking me to win. She was asking me to break the pattern. Over the next weeks, I met with the family trust advisors and sorted out the finances. I made it clear, no more secret loans, no blank checks. My father's business would be monitored for ethical practices. The Brentwood house was now under review for overdue maintenance, something my parents had neglected for years. The pushback was immediate. My father called twice, furious, threatening to contest the will. The lawyer shut that down quickly. Maggie's documentation was airtight. My mother tried a softer approach, inviting me to dinner, offering to help with the trust. I declined. I had work to do. Tyler, though, surprised me. A week after our showdown, he sent me a text. You serious about this vocational thing? What counts? I replied, anything that isn't just for show. Volunteer work, trade school, teaching, whatever you want. Just do it for real. He didn't answer right away. But I noticed he stopped posting from parties on social media. He started to disappear from the background noise. I threw myself into my own work, too. For years, I'd been an analyst at a mid-sized financial firm, grinding for clients who barely remembered my name. Now, with Maggie's resources and her example, I started building something new, a financial planning service focused on people like me. Overlooked. Underestimated. People with dreams bigger than their bank accounts. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because for the first time, I understood the difference between being invisible and being seen. Maggie hadn't given me money. She'd given me the power to decide who I wanted to be. And as the trust's first quarterly reports came in, showing honest gains, I realized this was just the beginning point. 3 months passed before I saw my family together again. It was Tyler who called for it, not my parents. He invited us all to the lake cottage, insisting on cooking dinner himself, a first in Mitchell history. The old me would have expected disaster. This time, I felt something closer to curiosity. The drive up was quiet. I rehearsed what I might say, but mostly I thought about Maggie's cards and the strange comfort I found in their lessons. I wondered if Tyler had found any comfort, or if he was just going through the motions to keep his inheritance. When I arrived, the cottage looked different. The overgrown lawn was trimmed, the porch swept, windows washed. I stepped inside and was hit by the smell of roasting vegetables and something baking bread. Maybe. Tyler stood in the kitchen wearing a faded apron, sleeves rolled up. He grinned, nervous and sheepish. Surprise. I haven't burned anything yet, he said. My parents sat at the table, unusually quiet. My dad avoided my eyes, tracing the rim of his coffee cup. My mom smiled, but it was fragile. Dinner was awkward at first, full of shallow questions and safe answers. I let the silence stretch, refusing to fill it for anyone else's comfort. Halfway through, Tyler finally said, "So, I started volunteering at a community garden. They teach kids how to grow their own food, and, I'm actually getting certified in sustainable landscaping." He looked at me, not seeking approval, but just showing up. Present. "It's harder than it looks," he admitted, "but I think I'm getting the hang of it." My mother beamed, eyes glassy. My dad gave a stiff nod. For once, nobody made a joke at anyone's expense. Later, while cleaning up, Tyler pulled me aside. "You know, I hated you at first," he said quietly. "Thought you were just showing off, doing all this to embarrass us. But I get it now. Grandma saw who I was and who you were. She was just waiting to see what we'd do with it." He handed me a folded note, a recipe card, but this time in Tyler's handwriting. "Trust isn't given, it's built. Every damn day." I smiled. "She'd like that one." "Yeah. Still working on the rest." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. My dad still bristled at every decision I made for the business. My mom kept trying to play peacemaker, apologizing for things she didn't do. But things shifted, tiny, almost invisible changes. Tyler stopped dodging accountability. My parents, however begrudgingly, started listening more and demanding less. Meanwhile, my new business grew. The first clients came by word of mouth: nurses, teachers, small business owners tired of being overlooked. Each case felt like another piece of Maggie's legacy coming to life. The work was honest, sometimes exhausting, but I felt more alive than I ever did before. One night, going through the last of Maggie's recipe cards, I found the one that brought it all home. When you have the power to break a cycle, use it. That's the only true inheritance. It didn't erase the past, but it gave me permission to build something better. As the seasons changed, so did the Mitchell family, slowly, fitfully, but undeniably. The Trust's quarterly meetings became less about confrontation and more about planning. I made a point to keep everything transparent, sending detailed reports, inviting questions, even when the questions stung. Tyler stayed true to his commitment. The garden project at the cottage blossomed, literally and figuratively. Kids from the local school built raised beds, painted old benches, learned how to compost. Tyler found a way to turn the cottage into a living workshop, weekends packed with volunteers, the place humming with energy. He posted updates on social media, not for show, but to recruit help or share small victories. He was different now, and it wasn't just the work. He had patience, purpose. Sometimes, watching him teach a kid to plant tomatoes, I saw flashes of the brother I'd always wanted to know. My parents softened too, though their change came in smaller, quieter ways. My mother started visiting the garden, bringing snacks, staying late to help clean up. She asked for my advice on finances, even if she didn't always take it. My father, stubborn as ever, still resisted most of my oversight, but I caught him more than once fixing things around the Brentwood house he'd neglected for years. Once, after a tough meeting about the business, he left a mug of coffee on my desk. No words, just the gesture. Meanwhile, my financial planning firm took off. Clients sent thank you notes, single mothers, retirees, people who'd spent their lives feeling invisible. For every success story, I thought of Maggie and how she'd seen me when no one else did. I kept her recipe cards in my desk drawer, rereading them when the days felt heavy. The more control I exercised, the more I realized Maggie's final gift wasn't just authority. It was dignity, the chance to lead without becoming cruel, to fix things without breaking people. I had the power to take revenge, but I chose restoration. It wasn't easy. Sometimes, when my father pushed back or my mother wept over some new change, I questioned myself. But I remembered Maggie's words. Power handled with patience grows roots, not thorns. 6 months after inheriting the trust, I held an open house at the Brentwood property. We invited neighbors, former employees, even a few extended relatives. Instead of bragging about assets, I told stories about Maggie's resilience, about second chances, about the future we were building. Tyler stood beside me, talking about the garden project and the next phase, scholarships for kids who wanted to study sustainable agriculture. That night, my father approached me quietly, hands in his pockets. "Your grandmother was a tough woman," he said, voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I see now what she was trying to do. I waited, not trusting myself to speak. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. "Don't waste what she gave you, David. Make it count." It was the closest thing to approval I'd ever gotten. Later, alone, I realized that for all the years I'd spent craving their recognition, what mattered most was finally having my own. A year passed. The family that once revolved around unspoken grudges and old wounds had, in its own stubborn way, begun to heal. We still argued, sometimes fiercely. But there was a new honesty. My parents no longer tiptoed around the truth. Tyler and I could joke about the past, even the ugly parts, without bitterness. For the first time, it felt like we were building something real, not just pretending for the holidays. I kept Maggie's recipe cards close. They became a ritual on hard days. I'd pull one at random. It was uncanny how often her words matched what I needed. On the anniversary of her passing, I found the last card, buried at the bottom, in handwriting shakier than the rest. Legacy isn't what you leave them. It's what you wake up inside them. I started to understand. The money, the trust, the property, those were tools. But the real inheritance was harder to name. The quiet validation of being seen, the dignity of being trusted, the agency to make choices and face their consequences. With the family trust stable and Tyler's garden project thriving, I poured myself into my work. My firm grew faster than I could have imagined. Clients sent stories, how a simple plan let them pay off debt, send their kids to college, or start a small business. Each thank you felt like another debt to Maggie, a new reason to keep going. Sometimes, my dad still challenged my decisions. Sometimes, my mom relapsed into old patterns. Tyler still struggled, some days more than others. But the cycles were breaking. Slowly, stubbornly, but for good. One night, as the sun set behind the Brentwood house, Tyler and I sat on the porch, feet up on the rail, sharing a quiet beer. "You ever think she planned all of this?" he asked, half smiling. "The humiliation, the test, the stupid recipe cards?" I laughed, shaking my head. "She planned everything, Ty. She just knew we'd only understand when we were ready." He grew serious. "You ever resent her for it?" I thought about it. Sometimes. But mostly, I'm grateful. She saw something in both of us. Something worth the effort. Tyler nodded, silent. In the hush, I realized the anger that used to live between us was gone, replaced by something like respect. Not perfect, but real. Before heading inside, I tucked the last recipe card into my pocket. I'd stopped needing her approval. I had become the man she saw in me, and the one I was finally proud to see in myself. Maggie's legacy was never about the money. It was about dignity, agency, and the power to choose, then to use that power to heal instead of hurt. That was the inheritance I would pass on, not as a lesson in a will, but as the way I lived, every day.